Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you're watching us from. Welcome to the India series. My name is Sanam Arora. I'm the chairperson of the NISAU, which is the National Indian Students and Alumni Union in the UK. We're the oldest and the largest body representing students, alumni, and young professionals of Indian origin in Britain. Professionally, I'm a consultant to the investment management industry, but like all of my colleagues in the NISAU, we volunteer some of our time to ensuring the best environment possible for Indian students in the UK and to put Indian students and youth at the heart of the bilateral relationship between Britain and India. Ultimately, our aim is to champion India, not just in the UK, but globally. We're delighted to be partnering with King's Business School and King's College London to bring to the UK a very unique set of events, the India series. King's, as you know, as all of you know, is a leading global university. So we are delighted to have such a special focus on India from them. Now, with its strong democratic principles, a large and young population, and a diverse and rich culture, India has frequently captured the world's imagination as the next big thing. Indeed, over the last 2 decades, India has impressed with its strong economic growth, an ambitious space program, and its IT capabilities and infrastructure. But while India has made much progress, many, both within India and outside, believe that it can achieve a lot more. For too long, India has been on the cusp of more dramatic change, but it hasn't quite made this transition yet. So in this series of discussions, my co-chair, Dr. Kamini Gupta, who is an associate professor at King's Business School, and I will speak to thought leaders across sectors to explore this paradox between where India currently is and what it promises to become. We'd like to explore things like how India can leverage its unique resources and capabilities to claim its place as a global superpower. How can India lead the world in the next few decades, and what areas is it particularly poised to lead in? What are the challenges that have prevented India from fully delivering on its potential, and how can we overcome them? Now, it is fundamental for both Dr. Gupta and I that we go beyond just discussion. There's been a great increase in the number of webinar-based conversations. And while these discussions are important and have increased access to expert insights, we want to take this forward to the next step. And at the end of our discussion today, we will tell you more about what we mean by going beyond discussion. Now, before I introduce our very, very special guest today, I'm going to ask you to get active. So on your screens, for those of you who are participating through the Zoom webinar, on your screens, you have a Q&A box that you should be able to now see a question. So if I request my colleagues to bring up our question. And the question that I want you all to think about and please respond on is, which of the following topics requires the most urgent attention to push India into its next phase of inclusive growth and development? You can choose up to 3 options. If you're watching on Facebook, you can let us know by commenting on the chat box as well. But for those who are in the webinar, 30 seconds, please give us your choices. We're going to stop taking responses soon, so please get them in soon if you haven't already. Lovely. We have the responses up on screen, and a whopping 86% of respondents think that education and employability requires the most urgent attention to push India into the next phase of inclusive growth, followed by healthcare, science, and technology, which have scored quite highly. And we're delighted, therefore, to have chosen the topic of healthcare, science, and technology to start off our conversations. And at this juncture, I would like to welcome our very, very special guest today, Mrs. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. She really doesn't need any introduction from any of us, really, but let me just bring up some highlights. Kiran is the executive chairperson of Biocon. She's a biopharmaceuticals pioneer, a trailblazing entrepreneur, and a phenomenal role model, not just for corporate leadership, but perhaps equally more importantly, for how one can do well by doing good, for profit with purpose, or as how Kiran would call it, for compassionate capitalism. She is a recipient of numerous awards and honors, including two of the Indian top honors, the Padma Shri and the Padma Bhushan. And Kiran was most recently awarded the Ernst & Young World Entrepreneur of the Year. So very many congratulations on that, Kiran. Kiran's also a COVID warrior, and we're relieved that she has now fully recovered from COVID and also very helpfully shared her experience with the world. So Kiran, welcome to this India series, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sana. It's a pleasure.
Now, let me add my voice to that. And thank you very much, Kiran, for joining us. We are very excited to begin this conversation, this important conversation on how to push India to its next phase of growth. And today's theme is really, it is healthcare and science and tech. More specifically, it is the post-COVID India opportunity. And what better way to start a discussion on that than to talk about the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the role of entrepreneurship in that. So Kiran, I want to start by talking to you a little bit about, or asking you a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, from what you've described as having been an accidental entrepreneur to becoming the global entrepreneur of the year. So I'd very much like you to take us through that entrepreneurial journey, what lessons it has held for you, and what lessons you could give to other young people thinking of taking entrepreneurship, especially women. So when we had registrations coming in, there were several women who mentioned that they would like to ask you about, the challenges or the opportunities for women to take up entrepreneurship as well. So let's start by talking about that.
Thanks, Kamini. And, as I said, it's a pleasure to be on this platform and share my views and my experience with all those who are listening in. I would like to start by saying that, yes, I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I never planned to start a business. In fact, I didn't even know that I had business acumen. So that's the first message I want to send to any aspiring entrepreneur, that it's not about going to King's College, for instance, and going through a very formal business, curriculum. That always helps because I know that you have very smart entrepreneurs coming out of formal business education. But in many cases, you will see that it's really about shaping an idea, about taking an idea to the market. That's what entrepreneurship is about. Now, in my case, I was actually wanting to pursue a profession and a career in brewing because I had actually studied to be a brewmaster, from Australia. And I thought I was going to be very sought after when I came back to India because I was the first qualified Indian brewmaster. But then I was in for a rude shock because they didn't think this was a job for a woman. And they also felt I was high risk for them because I was a woman and it was a male dominated industry. So they basically said there was no job for me. And it was really as a rebound that I had an accidental encounter with a biotech entrepreneur from Ireland who saw me starting a biotech company in India. And as I said, my first reaction when I got this offer to partner this entrepreneur, I said, well, I know nothing about business. I don't have a business education and I don't have any money to invest. So, it was really a very tough decision for me, but it didn't seem to be such a tough decision for my partner. My Irish partner said, look, I've been through this before. It's about having, a sort of a commitment to doing something in terms of feeling excited in a purposeful way about taking an idea to the market. And that idea that he shared with me was about developing enzyme technologies or enzymes for greening businesses. Because what he explained to me was, he said, look, most of the industrial processes actually involve chemical processes which are very polluting. And biotech has an opportunity of greening these businesses by replacing them with enzyme technologies. And since I was very familiar with enzyme technologies, having studied brewing, he said, that's your starting point. You start with brewing and you go on to many other industries, and I think it will be very exciting. And it was that idea that basically got me interested in starting my business. It was really a very frugal start I had. I started my business in my garage. I had 10,000 rupees in the bank. I had no idea how tough it was going to be to, start a company and run a company. I didn't realize that, being a woman was going to be so tough in terms of entering the business world. People didn't want to work for a woman. Banks didn't want to lend to a woman. And it was very tough in those early days. But I was very besotted with that idea of enzymes and enzyme technologies and biotech. And I said, no, I'm going to make a go of this. So I think what I've learned in my entrepreneurial journey is, yes, I think every entrepreneur faces different kinds of hurdles. In my case, a lot of those hurdles were perception hurdles because they were all gender linked hurdles, right? But I was determined to overcome those hurdles. And I basically kept selling my science led story. I said, hey, this is a great opportunity for me. I can build a business that's about research. So it was a research led business idea which really excited me. It was a opportunity for me to create a business based on scientists. So I could hire scientists. And I thought, wow, what a cool opportunity is that. And thirdly, I said, science is agnostic to gender. So I want to give opportunities to women scientists to come and join me in this journey of mine. So everything seemed to be very exciting. And I felt, hey, this is a pioneering journey because nobody has started a biotech company. So all in all, I was very excited and passionate about what I was doing. It was a very purposeful journey. And that's one thing I've learned is if you have a sense of purpose, you really drive your agenda and your business thinking very strongly. And my purpose at that time was really to replace polluting technologies with green enzyme technologies, which I thought was a great mission to have. It was not the time of climate change and environmental sustainability. So it was tough to convince people that they ought to replace their chemical polluting technologies. But I somehow did manage to convince a lot of industries. And now, when I look back on many of the industries that I started influencing, I'm really glad to see many of those have completely shifted from chemical to enzymes. So I think, these kind of processes are long-term processes. And in an entrepreneurial journey, I started with enzymes. But halfway through my journey, I realized that, hey, my technologies can actually be leveraged to other sectors. And I thought, okay, the healthcare sector is a sector where I can really use my technologies very, very intelligently. And I thought this is a unique opportunity because it allows me to actually address a huge unmet need in India. India was the diabetes capital of the world, and we were importing all our insulins. And the sad part was that even though recombinant human insulin was actually available, very few people could afford recombinant human insulin. Everyone in India, most people were using animal insulins. And I thought I've got to do something about that. I mean, just because people can't afford it, well, that's my driving mission. Let me focus on affordable, essential medicines, which are expensive to buy or import, but I should actually develop technologies that can make them affordable. So I started with that whole focus on insulin. And then I moved on to cancer because that was another very expensive area to treat. And most of the new cutting edge, cancer therapies were biologics. And no one was making biologics in India. So I said, hey, I should make them and make it affordable. And that's how I started my whole entry into the pharmaceutical world. And today I'm really pleased that we are one of the largest biopharmaceutical companies in Asia. I'm really pleased that we are one of the leading insulins companies in the world. We're also one of the leading biosimilars companies in the world because we are actually focused on affordable access to these life-saving, expensive medicines, which otherwise would not be accessible to most patients in India. And I'm glad we've really expanded that access in India just because we brought down prices. So, again, now today I'm really focused on affordable access in the healthcare space. I want to make global impact. In fact, I talked about, delivering insulin at 10 cents per day to global markets because, there's so much controversy around how much insulin costs in not just the developing world, but in the developed world as well. And I know I'm the lowest cost producer of insulin, so I think I can disrupt this market. So, things like that have made me realize that you ought to have a very deep rooted sense of purpose. You have to almost function in mission mode as an entrepreneur to succeed. And you must not be scared to take risks because, yes, nobody wanted to invest in these areas because they felt that it was very, large investments with no certainty. But I was willing to take those kind of risks because I felt this was a need. And whenever you address a very, very urgent need, I feel that it allows you to do things in ways that you didn't imagine.
Right.
Able to get people focused on a lot of what you're trying to do. So maybe that's where I'll kind of end my little saga. I want to tell all the women who are listening to this program that look, I think it's about believing in yourself, having a kind of a very deep sense of purpose and a strong belief that you can do it. It's about self-confidence. It is about pursuing a passion and a purpose that makes you feel good.
Right. No, that's very interesting that you talked about some of the challenges you faced as a woman. You talked about the perception problem that this is not a job for a woman, that a woman is seen as a high risk, and banks didn't want to lend to women. And I find it strange that unfortunately this still persists. This perception bias still persists to a large extent. And what you're talking about, that self-confidence therefore becomes very important to break through an external perception boundary that might have been created by the society. But pushing again on the opportunity bit, so I found what you're saying about opportunity very interesting. I incidentally teach entrepreneurship, which I agree. I mean, you need to have some natural entrepreneurial talent as well, but you can learn from studying it. And the way I conceptualize opportunity is that it's a fit between a pressing problem that your customer has or the society has, and your belief in a solution you can provide to that problem. In your case, you talked about the fact that you discovered this non-polluting green enzyme technology and applications for it beyond the conventional areas, so to other areas such as biopharmaceutical and healthcare. Pushing on the idea of the post-COVID entrepreneurial opportunity, what might be some key areas of opportunity that you might say entrepreneurs should be thinking about right now, the pressing problems where solutions might be easy to develop?
So as you know, Kamini, I think this adversity has thrown up enormous opportunities, and it has actually thrown up opportunities you never thought existed. So let me start by saying that COVID, of course, for our sector, threw up enormous opportunities in terms of just developing indigenous test kits. Because, when we started COVID, we realized that we didn't have enough kits to test, people with. And everything was imported. So we said, hey, this is not a good place to be in. And I think it was interesting and very encouraging for me to see that a large number of small biotech companies who are struggling to survive suddenly say, hey, this is an opportunity for us. And very soon, within a few weeks, we had companies who could come up with kits, with what we call as RT-PCR kits. Now, of course, months later, we've come up with rapid antigen tests, rapid antibody tests, ELISA tests, point of care tests, saliva-based tests. you name it. And I think a whole bunch of companies have very quickly taken advantage of this opportunity and have come up with very innovative products that I never thought India would do at such a prolific rate. So that's music to my ears, that this adversity has suddenly unleashed a very strong innovation quotient in our industry. Of course, not to mention that suddenly the textile industry repurposed itself to make PPEs and masks and all the kind of protective gear that you need to fight this pandemic with. And then, of course, companies in India started also developing vaccines. There were a lot of companies developing vaccines, but struggling to attract venture capital. Suddenly, with this, COVID crisis, I think people were willing to invest in many of these companies, and two of them have actually come to the fore. There are two Indian vaccines also under development at the moment. And in addition to that, I think we as a company also started looking at treatments, and there were a lot of treatment options by using repurposed drugs. So we came out with one of our repurposed drugs, which we think is doing a phenomenal job in mitigating the cytokine storm that this virus creates and causes death as a result of that. So I think a lot has come out of COVID. But what I would also like to expand beyond just the healthcare sector, our sector, biotech and pharmaceutical sector, is what the digital world has thrown up. As you know, the digital world has suddenly become such a big world, which we never even thought we were going to really see in our lifetime at this scale. And what has happened is that you've got all kinds of things happening. In India, we've got, telehealth support for all patients who are being quarantined at home, for instance. We've got, of course, even in the main hospitals where the older, more experienced doctors don't want to go physically into those COVID wards, they're actually working with the younger doctors through telemedicine, telling them how to deal with patients. Then we've got, of course, industries who are getting used to work from home protocols, right? So the IT sector, for instance, has done a tremendous job in India. Almost 95% of people are working from home in many of the IT companies. I serve on the board of Infosys, and in our company, I know that over 90% are working from home even today, and very efficiently, I might add. And remember, when you work from home, cyber security is an issue, connectivity is an issue, and what have you. And all of this has been taken care of very efficiently by the entire IT sector. So you can imagine what kind of services and support services you need to make sure that it's a very safe environment to work from home. And then, of course, you've got all these virtual models of connectivity and connections and discussions and webinars and what have you. So a lot of companies are coming up with various models of doing things smartly. The other thing is in the whole healthcare area, suddenly there are huge opportunities in digital therapeutics, in wearables, in monitoring, in assessing data, in real time, all-time monitoring, all these kind of things. And of course, our Prime Minister has recently announced the National Digital Health Mission. Now, that is going to open up a huge new set of opportunities for everybody to think about. And I believe that this is an opportunity for us to really deliver good quality healthcare across the board. Today we have a huge disconnect between rural India and urban India, between private sector and public sector hospitals. But I think you can change all this through digital technologies. And I also believe that, healthcare is a right, and we must make sure that everybody has access to healthcare. So I think digital technologies have to also address, affordability and accessibility. So there's so many opportunities, and I can go on and on and on, but I thought I'll mention some of these.
Thank you for bringing the National Digital Health Mission, Kiran. That has been a fantastic announcement recently. And, as you say, it can really revolutionize and bring this confluence together of digital healthcare and really, India is well poised to lead in that sector in many
Yes,
ways.
Sanam, from very poor healthcare to healthcare for all, which is a
That's
fantastic thought.
absolutely. But Kiran, I want to probe on that. What are the challenges that we need to be very conscious of right from the get-go that you have faced through your journey so far that we can avoid and learn from and make sure that this leap that we can make in digital healthcare really does happen?
There are lots of unmet needs. There are lots of challenges that we have to address. As I just mentioned, let's start with just the COVID situation, right? I mean, today we know that although we want every person who has COVID to be able to be admitted into a hospital, we know that, the government hospitals actually did a great job all over the country. But they were under resourced in many, many ways. They didn't have enough ventilators. By the way, that's also an area where companies in India developed ventilators. And from 45,000 ventilators across the country in March, which was what the inventory was, we now make almost 50,000 ventilators a month, and we're exporting ventilators. So you can see what this adversity has done for that innovation as well. So I think medtech is also a big opportunity for India, okay, because we've got good engineering talent. But coming back to the challenges in terms of how do we use digital technologies to address some of them, as I mentioned, you go to the remote areas of India and they barely have any healthcare. They don't even have sanitation. They don't even have clean drinking water. Those are the other things we have to look at addressing if we want better healthcare. We know that maternal and child healthcare is another area which needs to be improved. We have very alarming levels of stunting of children because they are malnourished. And we can fix all of that, because if you actually focus on providing good nutrition to the mother and child for the first 1,000 days of the baby, we know that a lot of the problems that are associated with stunting and withering and all those kind of problems that kids faced because they are not undernourished or malnourished, I think can be overcome. And these kids can have a great opportunity in life, because nothing should come in their way of doing well, educating themselves well, and seizing opportunities. We also know that there is a big difference in from state to state in India. Some states are doing very well in healthcare, others are doing miserably in healthcare. And we need to make sure that we come to a minimum standard which allows us to get good quality healthcare. I know that we are constantly only focusing on tertiary healthcare. Even today, our Ayushman Bharat program is really focused on cashless tertiary care, hospital care, right? We also have wellness centers in Ayushman Bharat, but I think that's where the opportunity is to give this holistic healthcare, which includes preventive and tertiary healthcare. And in preventive healthcare, it's really about using technology to focus on diagnostics. I think we really need to focus on diagnostics. Data is everything. And if you get diagnostic data, you can use it very well. You can actually use artificial intelligence to prompt, even if a doctor is not there, you can prompt a nurse practitioner to diagnose a patient's condition. Today, the government has also done a very, very phenomenal intervention for the medical sector by saying that they are going to allow diploma courses uh, as internships in hospitals across the country, 1 year and 2 year and 3 year diplomas, which make them into specialists. Okay. And I think this will increase the kind of human resource that we need in our villages, in our cities, everywhere else. So I think it's a very, very opportune time for the healthcare sector in India. I think we need to really leverage digital technologies in more ways than one. And I think we can really transform and leapfrog from a country that spends less than 1% on healthcare. How do we increase that spend, but do it so smartly that with that incremental spend, we actually get a lot more for our investment?
Absolutely. And Kiran, taking that one step forward to have some form of a public-private partnership, what role do you think the private sector can play specifically as we move to this accessible, affordable model of healthcare, digital healthcare?
So today, if you look at it, the government sector has the largest number of beds. But when it comes to specialty care, I would say 70% or even 80% of specialty care is in private sector. So that's where the mismatch is. And I think there is a real compelling reason and an opportunity to get a public-private partnership that allows both sectors to do what they are good at. And I think we ought to get it under this universal healthcare umbrella to see what is the role of the private sector, what are they best suited to do, and how do you regulate that bit so that everything is fair and equitable, and how do you make sure that the public sector gets more trust and from the public at large. Today, if you ask even a poor patient, they'd rather go to a private hospital, even if it's not that good, rather than go to a government hospital. And that should change. That thinking should change. I think we need to invest in our government hospitals, upgrade them, bring them up to a basic level where nobody should mind going, and it doesn't cost that much. But when it comes to specialty care, big investments, wanting high end talent, which only the private sector is willing to make those investments, that's where the government has to work with private sector to say, okay, how do we allow you to get your fair return on that investment? That's where the whole regulatory framework comes into being. And then how do you make sure that you include your um, rural economies so that they also get the benefit of good healthcare? How do you encourage a private sector hospital to also be present in the rural heartland of India? There has to be some incentive, something that makes it meaningful for them to set up these establishments in the rural parts of India. Otherwise, everything is highly skewed towards urban India, and rural India gets nothing. So I think we need to look at some of these things.
And if I may, before we go into the audience Q&A, we'll explore one more theme, which a lot of questions are actually already coming about, Kiran, which is to what extent are you seeing, sustainability, environmental, social governance concerns, and impact investing then start to come to the fore? Because speaking from a UK perspective, certainly ESG investing has gone through the roof, and it's absolutely primarily the concern of a lot of retail investors, but also phenomenally of institutional investors who are responding to investor demand in that sense. So is ESG impact investing really on the rise in India? Are we consciously taking that opportunity? Or is there more that can be done in reigniting the growth engine, but sustainably?
Well, I think there is a very clear recognition of its importance. I think we are focused very strongly on renewable energies. We are talking about not just renewable energy as in solar power and wind power and the other sort of non-fossil fuel related energy sources, but we are also looking at, for instance, electric vehicles. That's a big policy in India. So I just think that there is a recognition at a corporate level. I think there is a huge focus on ESG, but I would say it's not the entire corporate sector. I would say that maybe 30% of the corporate sector is very focused on ESG, and there's a lot more to do. But I think what is interesting is that there is a strong focus on gender diversity. There is a strong focus on environmental sustainability. I think there is a strong focus on inclusive economic development. And a lot of the CSR spends that happen in India are really looking at this inclusive economic spend.
So thanks very much on giving some of these specific thoughts about where we can go forward in developing the healthcare model in India. And you talked about many important issues, including the inequity that we see in healthcare in India, which I think is very pressing, and which I think COVID has exposed even more. Perhaps the fault lines
Yeah.
in our society have been exposed further. So there are lots of questions coming in, Kiran, and I want to start talking about one of them. So this is by Tuba Kidwai, and he says, or she says, that India is doing quite well in multiple fields of science, especially Biocon and Serum Institute of India have contributed immensely during the pandemic. But science is not a priority for media. The masses in India don't really hear as much as they should about science and what our scientists are doing, Indian scientists are doing. And building on this question, and this person asks whether media can play a role in this. And I would just build on this a little bit more to say that perhaps this creates a perception both internally and externally as to the capability and investment in science within India. Is that something you'd like to talk about? Is that something we can do both to change this perception about Indian capabilities internally and externally?
Well, COVID has changed that perception. In fact, I would say that today, not a single newspaper is without news on vaccines and COVID and the science and technology that is developing new products or new technologies or new devices or surfaces that protect, that don't catch the virus and this and that and what have you. So I think this particular pandemic has brought a lot of focus on science and technology and the importance of science and technology in solving these kind of unexpected, serious global problems. I think the agricultural sector also has actually benefited from COVID because, as you know, that is one sector that has shown growth compared to all other sectors. And the reason is, of course, we've had good rainfall. But in addition to that, I think there has been a huge focus on at least the availability of food. Okay. And I think of produce, agricultural produce in general. And I think today is a time for agri-tech in a big way. So that's another big entrepreneurial opportunity. So I would say that, yes, I think science and technology has certainly received a strong attention at last, I would say. And I hope going forward, media will stop ignoring science and technology. In fact, sometimes when you read a lot of the reports in the media, you understand you realize how little they understand about many of these issues. And the way they report, you can see, is very unscientific. But I'm hoping that in time, there will be a lot more focus on getting science reporters who report properly, who do more research and understand the science and report it very scientifically. But it has to be done in a simple way so that people are interested to learn. See, I think what happens is science has always been reported in journals. It's never been in the open, the general media. Today, we have to demystify science, and that's what COVID has done. And so lots of people are talking about different aspects of COVID, and at least it's demystifying science and technology. And when you hear about a test, there are ways of simplifying and explaining that test. And people are now actually reading about science and technology and getting very excited to actually be part of the science and technology community. So for me, it's very, rewarding.
And absolutely, Kiran, as you said, we have to demystify science, which is why it was very important for us to start today with you, with science, technology, healthcare amidst this talk of COVID. And there are a lot of questions coming in around the Oxford University vaccine trial. So Priyanka Mehta has just asked that the trial of the Oxford University vaccine has been put on hold. Many scientists have even said that we may never be able to find a COVID-19 vaccine like SARS or MERS. So linked to that, her question and the question of many others is, what is the way forward in reviving the economy? Obviously, we've all seen the numbers. The quarter-on-quarter growth hasn't been great. And the question then is, A, what steps do we need to take, assuming that there will not be a vaccine? Let's assume that is the sort of worst case scenario. And B, what sort of timelines do you envisage to recovery or growth, or back to growth, actually?
So let me start in different ways. So the first thing is, Look, I don't think we should get so pessimistic about not finding a vaccine. I think all of us who come from the medical and pharmaceutical world have always cautioned the waiting world that it's not easy to develop a vaccine in such a short period of time. I think all of us have been batting for developing vaccines in the right way. There should not be any shortcuts. We don't want this warp speed, development of vaccines, which compress timelines to such an extent that you're really, really taking big risks. And I think the one thing that this Oxford vaccine program being paused has shown to everyone is the very thing we were all talking about. There are risks in developing vaccines, and remember, vaccines are given to healthy people. So all the volunteers are perfectly healthy people. And that's why whenever you see these serious adverse events, you have to make sure that it is not going to happen, it's a one-off, or that it was not was it related to the vaccine? Wasn't it related to the vaccine? And even if it's related to the vaccine, how serious is it? Is it happening in many people, or is it just happening in this one-off case? And for that reason alone, you need to do a vaccine trial over years. Okay. In this particular case, we want it to be done in 3 months. How is that possible? At least you need 1 year of data of safety to feel that, yes, out of the thousands, because there are so many, fortunately, there are multiple vaccines being developed. Okay. So fortunately, you will have hundreds of thousands of people's data available to you. And you will at least know how safe these vaccines are. Now, if you're seeing a lot of serious adverse events in every one of these vaccines, that actually puts you into a bit of a spot, because you need to go back, understand what is causing this problem, and probably rejig the vaccine. But I don't expect that to happen, because you've got different platforms of vaccines. So every vaccine is being made in a different way. So I think we shouldn't lose hope. I think you will be able to get a vaccine, but please don't expect the vaccine to arrive in 3 months by the end of this year, like everyone was waiting for. There has been a lot of politics around wanting this vaccine by the end of the year. But now I hope people realize the importance of being patient and waiting for the right vaccine to come, which has the safety profile that we all want and the efficacy profile that we all want, because we also want to know for how long are we going to be protected. So to do all this, you need at least a minimum of 1 year's data to tell you and give you the comfort that you've ticked all these 3 boxes at least for 1 year. Would you take a vaccine where you only tick 2 boxes and you don't know how long it's going to protect you for? Because you also don't know how long symptoms can also appear to, which were not expected. So I think we have to be careful. On the other hand, I think we must also understand that we have to focus on treatments. Today, we think that coronavirus is life threatening, and that's why everyone is so scared and in this alarmed state, saying that, oh my god, we need a vaccine fast, we want it tomorrow. But if you had a treatment that actually prevented mortality, and if you brought this mortality rate down to near zero, I think we should be comfortable knowing that even if you get COVID, you're not going to die. Look, I'll be very honest. When I was tested positive, when I tested positive for COVID, I did not panic. I did not think this was the end of me or end of the world for me, because I knew that I would survive this very easily. I was very good about testing as soon as I felt symptoms. I also went through a treatment which I knew would work, and I thought even if that treatment gets me into the next phase of the cytokine release syndrome, I know what to do. So I wasn't panicking. Okay. And believe me, just because I've come out of COVID, I know, many of my friends are reaching out to me, even people I hardly know are reaching out to me. And I think I'm at the moment managing about 20 people who have all tested positive in COVID, of which 15 people have already now been discharged. They are now recovering very well at home, and the other 5 are also going to be discharged very soon. So all of them now have got comfort that, yes, this is a manageable disease. The moment you know that this is a manageable disease, you will lose that fear that we all have today. And that's the message I want to give to everyone, saying, please do not panic. this is a manageable disease, but we need to drive it with science. I think we are not using enough science to manage either COVID or the the in terms of the outbreak or the disease itself, managing the disease. And I think we should be able to do that if everyone really uses science. I think today a lot of the doctors are treating symptoms rather than the cause. And a lot of the kind of testing we are doing is very ad hoc. We need to do a lot better job with COVID testing. Having said that, therefore, we can't afford lockdowns. Okay, I don't think we can afford any more lockdowns. We must understand that the economy must come back. Our livelihoods must come back. Okay, and the only way to do that is to start having strategies for having safe workplaces, and to make sure that we revive our economy by creating safer and safer workplaces, safer and safer social spaces. And I'm very confident that as the mortality rates go down and people don't get scared of this disease, the economy will come back. And I hope that happens in the next few months, at least by the end of this fiscal. I think we should be back to near normal, I would hope. Not that COVID is going to go away, but I don't think we should have, I think we will lose that fear that it is life threatening.
No, that's a compelling point, Kiran, especially this need to balance opening up the economy with protecting people. I mean, that balance can only be achieved by science, by using scientific insights in the right way.
And I must also mention one more thing, Kamini. I think we must mask up in public.
Yeah.
Because there's clear evidence to show that when you mask up, even if you catch the virus, the viral load is very low and you get away with mild disease. If you don't mask up, you're really exposing yourself in case you are next to someone with an asymptomatic virus carrier. I think you are in danger of getting a high viral load, which is where the problem is that you might get a little more severe disease. But if you wear a mask in a public place and be careful, believe me, you will actually, if you catch it, it'll be very mild. If you notice, I mean, all of us travel to Asian countries, and you see many people wearing masks. And you keep wondering, why are these people wearing masks here? They're all, I remember when I go to Japan, almost 50% of the people are wearing masks in the those bullet trains and things like that. And you're wondering, why are they wearing masks all the time? They are wearing masks because by their culture tells them that even if you have a cold or a cough, you should not infect others. So they wear a mask. But it is such a good practice, in this time at least, to wear a mask.
Right. And also, I mean, I think mask is very important. And like you reiterated in the past, getting tested early, which I've personally found very, very useful, as an insight coming from you, that the earlier you test, the more control you have sort of over this thing. So that's crucial as well. We have a lot of questions coming up on, still on entrepreneurship. So I asked in the chat window, I asked people, how many of you would consider taking up entrepreneurship? And only about 10% said we would consider it. And that also very tentative. And then a few people, mentioned the reasons why they wouldn't. So there is, let me see, there is, Dhanush says there's this perception of a lot of red tape in India. Joseph Thompson asked about the fact that, ma'am, we think there are a lot of challenges related to funding as well as regulation. So maybe this is something you can talk a little bit about, the challenges entrepreneurs face. Why are young people very capable, afraid of taking up entrepreneurship, and how can we fix that?
So you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, regulatory cholesterol is one of the biggest problems we have in India, and we need to remove it, And I think the way we have to remove it is, now that we are in a digital world, we have an opportunity to create virtual single windows. We have opportunities to do parallel processing. We don't have to do sequential processing, and we can cut down more than half the kind of steps that we normally need to go through. Most of them are redundant. We don't need to go through all those steps. And so we need urgent regulatory reforms that focus on better governance and less government. Our Prime Minister actually came up with minimum government, maximum governance. This is the time to do it. Okay. But more than anything else, I'm very happy to share with all of you that many state governments have come up with regulatory sandboxes. In our state of Karnataka, we are saying that for 2 years, any company that is given, that wants to start up doesn't have to worry about being compliant, because we are giving you 2 years time to be compliant. So you don't have to start with all the permissions that you need. And we are cutting down half the permissions that you need. So I think states are becoming quite adept at making sure that ease of doing business is getting better and better. Of course, I do understand that the larger companies benefit more than the smaller companies. So now we're telling them, please focus on the SMEs who find it a pain to go through all the compliances. So I think the sandboxes are now being, of course, startups have got a huge reprieve because they have these regulatory sandbox measures given to them. But even the SMEs need to do that. So I think in the next year or so, you'll find things have changed. So from that point of view, I'm very happy that they've actually taken a lot of our suggestions in many states. Okay. So I would say that that's one of the ways of solving this regulatory challenge that people have brought up. When it comes to funding, yes, there is funding problems, but I would say the government has been very supportive of financing in states also, financing entrepreneurs, startups. So I think whenever there's been a startup in many tech sectors, they've found both the Department of Biotech and the IT department has been very supportive of startups. There's lots of mechanisms of finding risk capital in India. The Department of Science and Technology celebrated its Golden Jubilee. And they also have played a tremendous role in providing grants for technology development, especially to entrepreneurs. So I think there's a lot going on. Many state governments are also adding to that by giving, grants and sort of soft loans and various things. I myself built Biocon with soft loans and finally with venture funding. But I think ultimately it's venture funding that will finally, grow the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Wonderful. And speaking of healthcare and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, a couple of questions that are coming. And speaking of balance, there's a lot of questions about the future and the past. And what I mean by that is that people are asking, a lot of students are asking how Ayurveda and the sort of Indian traditional sciences, the role that plays in healthcare and pharmaceuticals, and how we make sure that that comes more to the fore. But at the same time, and that was from Brahmi, and at the same time, students like Ishwar are asking, what is the role of artificial intelligence in pharmaceuticals? So what do you think of this past and present conundrum, and what's the way forward for both?
I think, Ayurveda is a very rich science, and I think we haven't leveraged it enough. I myself take a lot of Ayurvedic products, which are, I like them, and I think they do me good. And I think, you must understand there are some very successful companies in the Ayurvedic space. For instance, Zandu, for instance, Dabur, for instance, Himalaya Drug House. All these are very large, successful Ayurveda-based companies. Okay. And I think there's a huge opportunity to be an entrepreneur in that space. I think that we can actually use a lot of AI to make Ayurveda more scientific, to accelerate the pace of Ayurveda development. I think there's a lot to be done there. And I really think we can bring out some real treasure troves, which we are not looking at. As you know, the Chinese have been very good at phytopharmaceuticals, and we need to do the same. And we actually have a very good translational medicine, Institute of Medicine, in Health Medicine near Bangalore, which has actually got a fantastic repertoire of Ayurvedic medicinal plants. But I think we need to really leverage all this and make it into a real big, entrepreneurial opportunity. As far as AI in healthcare is concerned, I think today AI is being used in many ways because data science and data analytics is very popular today. As you know, even in COVID, there was a recent article that actually used artificial intelligence to understand how this disease manifests itself in that very complex, dangerous way. And they came out with this bradykinin science approach of cytokine storm. That was all done by just looking at data and using AI to find out what is it that we are missing. Today, digital therapeutics is playing a very big role in the way you market pharmaceuticals. So there's a lot of use of technology, both in research across the board.
So my next question is very related to what you talk about. On the one hand, Ayurveda, on the other hand, artificial intelligence, which is related to India's role in meeting global opportunities. So somebody here, Sarumati, talks about taking Indian jugaad to the world. But, when we think of jugaad, I think part of the disservice that might have done is to position India as a low-cost alternative. Though I do think that we can, increase accessibility and affordability by coming up with low-cost solutions. At the same time, we don't want to be seen as the world's back office. We want to also be seen for our innovation capabilities. So I wanted to reflect a little bit about on that. How should India position itself? How should Indian businesses position themselves in the global world? And what is their role in meeting global opportunities, not just Indian opportunities?
Yeah, I do agree with you that I think what is happening is that we tend to basically position ourselves as the lowest cost producer of everything, whether it's services or manufactured goods. We are trying to, play on that sort of cost arbitrage. I always often say to people that, look, we are the world's largest producer of vaccines. We are the world's largest producer of generic drugs, and yet our share of the pharmaceutical value chain is only 3%. So whilst we account for 30% of generic drugs in the world, while we account for 30% or even more of vaccines in the world, the fact of the matter is our value share is only 3%. And we have to go up that value chain, and we have to have much more of that share of the pharma value chain. And the only way we can do that is by innovation and original innovation and IP-led innovation. So I think the focus has to be on creating new IP. And I think the biggest challenge we have there is that we must learn to value that IP. I think Indians get shortchanged. The same IP coming out of the US gets maybe 3 or 4x of that valuation. The same IP coming out of India would get a quarter of that. So we need to basically make sure that we showcase our IP and value of IP. And that will only happen when we really have some breakthrough products. IT has this great potential because, again, they are the back office or the sort of the software engine of the world. But they need to also come up with value-added services, IP, embedded IP in their services or products if you can. So I think when you come up with also, if you look at it, most of our very successful IT companies are also Me Too companies. So you have the delivery services companies, you have the other kind of companies which have app-based companies, but they're all emulating something that's available somewhere else in the world. But look at the way China has come up with so many new, path-breaking companies, which now, of course, we need to now see if we can come up with the same. And I think we can. And even in the pharmaceutical place, we need to come up with new vaccines, new drugs, new diagnostics, and we can.
And Kiran, where do you think the education system that we have in India comes into all of this, and are we producing the right science brains? We've often said that the Indian education system is fantastic in that it produces people who can learn really quickly, people who can pick up concepts really quickly, but often the application side is not quite as strong, and that has indeed been the experience of some of us. So in taking up this entrepreneurial opportunity, in making sure that we can become the knowledge economy of the world, as the Prime Minister also recently said, what do you think needs to change or be enhanced in the education sector in India? And do you think there are any good examples in India where that's already happening?
Well, we've just announced the national education policy. And there, I think a lot of these aspects have been addressed. We've been regulating education far too much. We need to unregulate and deregulate a lot of our education sector. You can't do this and you can't do that, and only this curriculum can be used, and if you want to use another curriculum you have to get permission, and things like that. So we don't want those kind of strictures. Okay. Today, I think with a lot of the digital technologies that are available, you can have a lot of hybrid education programs. I mean, look at what's happening in COVID. There are so many digital online programs, so many, sort of digital programs which are being taught to students. And also, even after the COVID, post-COVID world, I'm sure there will be hybrid programs of some of them taught, through computer-aided educational means, and the others in the physical world, but where the teacher is aided by a computer, by the computer. So I think that is one aspect of education, but it's about the right skills and the right learning. How do we do that? For instance, I know that there are many, I think there are many online e-educational companies that are doing extremely well. You might have heard of companies like Byju's and those kind of startups which are doing extremely well. You also got startups or companies that are actually providing very specialized training or skills, like data analytics, like AI. There is a company in Bangalore that actually uh, just focuses on data science and data analytics, and it's actually been the back office of data analytics, but it also teaches data science and data analytics. So things like that. So I think it is about the right skills, the right education, and deregulating education in a big way. And then this whole, the state and the center gets very involved. The state say you can only open up Kannada medium schools, you cannot have more than so many English medium schools. You cannot be doing that kind of regulation. So I think the national education policy has actually freed up education in a big way. They're also allowing very easily um, for either partnerships or standalone schools and universities from overseas to come and establish themselves in India. We ourselves have something called the Biocon Academy, where we have actually partnered with a technical institute in California that focuses on biotech education. It's like a finishing school. So, all the people who kind of pass out of biotech programs in the country have come to this Biocon Academy for that very intensive program that allows them to understand how they can use their knowledge, okay, what they've learned in their colleges. And that's been a great success for us because we've had 100% placement record for Biocon Academy. And we probably certified about over, I guess, 2000, we've only had it running for about 3 years, but we've actually certified over 2000 such students who have been placed in all the biotech and pharmaceutical companies around the country. So I think there's a lot to be done. And, education is an evolving field across the country. I think they've clearly recognized that you cannot just be doing, sort of theory-based education. There has to be a project-based education. There must be internships. There must be, various projects being thrown at educational institutes, which gives them that sense of curiosity-driven education and research-driven education, which I think is very important.
Kiran, very final question, which many people are asking, and I'm very glad you touched on the Biocon Academy and the role that that's playing. The question that we're getting commonly is, how do biotech graduates go ahead and make their careers in what is today a very rapidly changing world? They're recognizing, especially after hearing you, that there is a great opportunity here, but do you have any hints and tips that our student audience might benefit from?
Look, today I think anyone in biosciences should consider themselves very lucky. I think the amount of opportunities there are in our field of whether it is agri-tech, whether it is pharma tech, whether it is industrial technologies or med tech, you name it. Look at the kind of skills we need. And every one of you just has to make up your mind, what is that area of interest for you in the life sciences? And the moment you make up your mind, what is it that interests you? I think the job is there for you. It's waiting for you. I mean, there are plenty of jobs in life sciences. And I can tell you that today, even though I am a sort of an aging entrepreneur, I've suddenly found a really new interest in immunology and immuno-oncology, and I'm learning so much about this subject. And I've just recently started another startup with, some of you might know of him, Siddharth Mukherjee, who's a very well-known oncologist from the US. We just started a new company called Immunil to offer CAR T therapies for cancer patients. These are the cell engineering, cell therapy, new cutting edge technologies to save leukemia and lymphoma patients, and I think this is so exciting. So I don't think anyone should feel where's the job or where's the opportunity, because there are just so many opportunities. It's not going to just happen if you're not interested in life sciences, but if you are, the job is there.
Very, very exciting to hear about Immunil, your startup with Siddharth, Kiran. So that's one thing I'm really going to look up into after the webinar. So very exciting, and congratulations on starting that. And I'm excited that we spoke, the last couple of questions touched on education and employability. Biocon Academy, from what I know, takes in a lot of women, which I commend you on as well. So that's very exciting, and that's great going as well. And going back to the poll that we did at the beginning of this webinar, where we asked people what are some issues that are urgent for India to answer. In that poll as well, education and employability sort of topped. 60% of you said that that's certainly a very important area that we should be focusing on. So let me connect back to the poll and to tell you that one of the reasons for asking you that poll questions was to get your inputs on what some of our other sessions in this series would be. So we will make sure, for example, to have a session on education and employability dedicated to that, on financial markets and economy. Our next session tentatively scheduled for November. We are hoping to think about issues related to capitalism, and we'll share more details with you soon. Healthcare and science and technology, of course, we've talked about today, but we will continue to talk about later on. But one of the things about the India series, as Sanam mentioned, is that we're very keen to go beyond just discussion and to involve you, as beyond being just passive listeners, so to say, or chatting, but to take it beyond that. So as all of you embark on your careers and your professional journeys, I know that there is a lot of pent up energy to contribute to India more immediately. And we're trying to create a platform to channel that energy so that you can actually contribute to India as soon as now. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to find a topic for each event, a topic that our speaker champions, and I'm going to ask Kiran about that in a moment. And then the goal would be to actually start to do a research project on that topic and create actionable insights which are backed by this research that will be led by Sanam and me. So that's something we're going to be doing, and we'll share a link with you right after the webinar where you can express interest in being a part of this research project in a whole variety of ways. So as much time or as little as you have, and whatever skills you have, we will try to find a way to fit you in so that you can contribute to that. So on the back of that, Kiran, before we end, I wanted to ask you that one question, and we've talked about a number of very important things, but if there was one question that you would pose to us and to India and say that this is something critical that we must answer to chart the way forward, what would that be?
Well, I can immediately think of one very, very important action item. I just talked about the National Digital Health Mission. And I think there's so much to do there to basically deliver on that promise of affordability and accessibility, and correct the mismatch between rural and urban India. And I would really urge everyone listening to this webinar to see what they can suggest or what new idea can they bring in to do this. How do we make sure that this healthcare for all is actually delivered in a very equitable way? I think that's the way we have to look at digital healthcare.
Right, as a means to create that equitable healthcare model within India. And I think that is a very, very good goal to have and to start this series with and that research project with. Sanam, do you have any final notes? And thank you very much again, Kiran, for joining us today and sharing your.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much, Kamini and Sanam.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Kiran and Kamini, and everyone who's joined in. This marks the start of young people getting right at the center of India's development, which only makes sense given 65% of our population is under the age of 35. And Kiran, just thank you so much for being such an inspiration. And we're really excited and thrilled that you've given us your time today. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.